As you're getting seated, we have the great pleasure today to have Chad Erlenborn is going to bring the message for us. Chad has been a covenant pastor for 18 years, and sure, don't you know, he's originally from the Midwest. And some of you may have seen him around. He works with World Vision as their national church advisor. Fun fact, he's run 0 marathons, but before you boo him, he has run an ultra marathon, so you know, I guess he's all right. Yes. Please welcome Chad.
Thank you, Jen. It is great to be back at Simi Covenant. It's great to worship with you. It's great to be together. Thanks for the worship team. Can we get up for the worship team again? They did a great job leading us in worship. So my name's Chad. I live actually in Camarillo, pastor for a number of years, married 4 kids, and I now work with World Vision, and I love World Vision. So just by a show of hands, if you know World Vision, if you prayed for World Vision, if you run for water, if you walk for water, if you sponsored a child, just raise your hand real quick. Thank you. I see those hands. Thank you for walking. Thank you for running. Thank you for contributing to God's work in the world. Mother Teresa said it this way: small things done with great love change the world. And your small acts, whether it's at Pasadena Covenant, whether it's with kids around the world, your small acts of love make a world of difference. So thank you for contributing to what God's doing in the world. So Pastor Kurt invited me to join you and to bring a message in a series, and I'm grateful to be here. But I'm also grateful for your pastor. I don't know how good you have it, but you have a great pastor. He is a man of God. Yeah, you can give it up for your pastor, because you've got a great pastor. He's a man of God. He's a man of the Word. He's a great teacher, and he loves you, and he loves those that don't know God yet. And he has a heart of a pastor, so I'm grateful to have an opportunity to share the Word today. And he gave me the book that we're going to read together. It's the book of Esther. It's one of my favorite Old Testament stories. And when I was reading it and studying it, I kind of leaned in on this one theme on time, specifically on the value of time. Yeah, if you want to get into the scriptures, you can do that QR code, but we're going to get into the value of time. Anyone ever heard the phrase like time is money? Anyone ever heard that phrase before? Yeah, okay, so, and in many ways, time is like money, right? You can spend money and you spend time. You can waste money and you can waste time. You can save money, but can you really save time? I mean, yeah, we can do things a little quicker. We can do things faster. We can be a little more efficient, but there is no bank account for time, right? I mean, you can't save time in a bottle. Sorry, Jim Croce. You know what? Once you use your time, it's gone. So time is much more valuable than money. And some of you know this. Some of you have already experienced this in your life. You already know that time is much more valuable than money. I mentioned I got 4 kids, and some of you actually, in my years of being part of this church community, you have prayed for one of my children, and she's doing great now. But one of my kids, when she was 4.5 years old, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And we had a long journey with cancer and chemotherapy, and she's healthy now. But it was really difficult. And she was diagnosed here in California, and we went through 2.5 years. So, and some of you know that storyline. You know the challenges of cancer and other medical challenges. Well, a week before her diagnosis, my daughter had a preschool art show. And I was pastoring, and the art show was just down the hall, and I could have very easily gone down the hall. But I thought, it's no big deal, right? It's just a preschool art show. And I didn't go. Well, that moment taught me an important lesson. I made a commitment after she got diagnosed that I would go to every preschool art show that I could. That I would come alongside her and my other 3 children as much as I could to be a part of their lives. That experience changed my understanding of time, because I almost lost one. And I realized that time is precious. Time is limited. Time is life. And sometimes we overlook the value of time. Sometimes we go to work, we go to bed, we do the same thing the next day. You go to work, go to school, go to bed, You know the next thing. And we get in our rhythms and we get in our ruts and we don't understand the value of this precious gift of time. It's limited. It's precious. It's life. And we sometimes miss or we waste time or we kill time or we're just going through time and we miss this extremely valuable resource of time with our family or time with our children or time to do the work that God called us in advance to do. And God has some very specific things to say to us about time in the Scriptures. There's multiple passages reminding us to make the most of our limited amount of time, to make the most of our opportunities. But today we're going to talk about the value of time in the book of Esther. And I want to introduce you to two people with different understandings of time. One had a really wonderful understanding of time. She knew the right words and she could say them at the right time, but the other person just didn't. Just had a bad sense of timing. One person had a sense of humility and grace to her life. The other person was filled with pride and arrogance. One person would actually pray and fast at different points to understand how valuable certain decisions are. The other person didn't pray at all. One person made the most of her life to sacrifice for the sake of others, and one person actually ended up losing his life. Anybody know who I'm talking about? It's Esther and Haman. These are the two people that we're going to learn about today because they have two vastly different understandings of time. Esther was this Jewish orphan that becomes, has this sense of what God has for her life, and Haman didn't. And we're going to enter into the story, but there's a few other characters that are important. There's Esther, Haman, King Xerxes, and Mordecai. So if you have your Bibles, I'd just love for you to turn there. Or for those of you online, you can get to your scriptures, or you can just, the words are going to be on the screen, and you can just enjoy the story and then turn to it on your own. But it's this awesome story about two individuals and these other four. It's a story about God's timing in individuals' lives and their understanding and the importance and the value of time. And Esther is this Jewish girl living in a foreign land, and she's an orphan. She was orphaned. And it's important she's living in a foreign land because God's people are in exile. They're outside the promised land. And let me just introduce you to these other characters so that we can get into this story. So Mordecai is Esther's uncle or cousin, but then she is his adopted. He adopts her, so it's his stepdad. Esther is the adopted daughter of Mordecai. King Xerxes is the king of Persia, and he's all right. And then there's Haman. All right, so from an emotional level, when you see Esther, you say, yeah. So let me just see you say, Esther, yeah. All right, that's good. One more time. Esther. Yeah. All right, now when you get to Haman, then you go like this, okay? Haman. No. This is fun. Esther. Yeah. Haman. No. Okay, Mordecai is another one. Mordecai's like this. So Mordecai. Yeah. Okay, and then you get to King Artaxerxes, and you're like, I don't know. All right, King Artaxerxes. I don't know. We'll figure him out later. All right, but these are the characters. This is the emotion that you have as you enter the story. If you're an Old Testament reader of the Scriptures, you would have some knowledge of this storyline. So that's the emotion that you would feel as you enter the story. So in Esther chapter 2, verse 7, this is what we read. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features. And Mordecai had taken her as her own daughter when her father and mother died. Here we go. Esther, I'm introducing you to Esther. She's not only an orphan living in a foreign land, she's also beautiful. And this is important. She's beautiful in form and feature. She's an attractive young woman. This is important because King Artaxerxes is looking for a new queen. He just fired his old queen for defying his orders, and he created a beauty contest for his new queen, in search for a new queen. Now, this might be hard for us to understand, having a beauty contest throughout the whole land to rise up the queen, but that's what they did. That's what he did. And in Persia at the time, it was very vast. It went from India, modern-day India, to the Upper Nile. There's 127 provinces, a massive amount of territory, and each province would bring the most beautiful person in their area to the capital city of Susa to see which one would be the most beautiful. The person, and that person would be the new queen. So Esther, as we learned, is beautiful. And she made it through the prelims. Like she made it from her little city. She made it to be the one that would then go to meet the king with other finalists. But before she can meet the king, she goes through some beauty preparation to get ready for her first date with the king. Now, I don't know how long it takes for a woman to get ready for her first date. No, if you were to ask my wife, she'd probably say, 5 to 10 minutes. Right? I don't know how long it takes you. Maybe for prom, for the high school students, it's a little bit harder, a little bit longer. Anyone want to guess how long it took Esther to get ready for her first date with the king? It was, here it is. Before a young woman came time to go into the king Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months. Yes, 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women. 6 months of oil and myrrh, 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. Can you imagine the pressure that this young girl felt to look beautiful? 12 months of preparations. 12 months of thinking, am I beautiful? Will he like me? 12 months of focusing on her physical beauty. 12 months of wondering if her worth and value really is wrapped up in how she looks. And according to the story, Esther wins. She wins the beauty contest. After these 12 months, she finds favor with the king, and the king selects her as from all the other women in Persia, and she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And all the people gather around this beauty queen, and all of a sudden, Esther is launched from this Jewish orphan girl to the queen of Persia. And she's not chosen because of her brains. She's not chosen because of her personality. She is chosen because of her physical beauty. She's eye candy for the king. She's the top woman in the king's harem. And after Esther wins this beauty contest, we're introduced to this man who has a misunderstanding of the value of time. He doesn't understand at the end of his life he's going to stand before God and give an account for how he lived his life. He doesn't understand how time is precious, how time is much more valuable than money, that time is limited. His name is Haman. And Haman is the King Artaxerxes, is a right-hand man. He's the chief of staff. And he's powerful. He's rich. He's wealthy. He's got influence. And he has him. Not only is he rich and powerful, he's prideful. He's full of arrogance. He is so full of arrogance that when other people enter into his presence, he expects them to bow down to him. And that's what he expects people to do. Haman expects people to take off their hat and bow down, and the scriptures actually say to worship him. That's where his mind is at. That's his misunderstanding of who he is and how to live his life. And most people do, because he's powerful. Because he's the right-hand man, because he's the chief of staff, because he's wealthy. Most people bow down to Haman, but not everybody. Mordecai, Esther's cousin, stepfather, does not bow down to worship Haman because he's a man of faith. He's a man that doesn't worship other gods. He bows down to Yahweh and Yahweh alone. And he does not worship Haman. He does not give Haman the honor that he demands, and that enrages Haman. And Haman can't stand it. Haman is so upset that Mordecai will not bow down to him, that he wants to punish him, that he wants him to make him pay, that he wants to just put his face in the dirt, and he gets so upset with Haman that he doesn't not only wants to kill. Haman does not want to kill Mordecai. He wants to kill Mordecai, Mordecai's family, and Mordecai's entire people, the entire Jewish people. And because he's influential, because he's powerful, because he's got a lot of wealth, he writes an edict, and he influences the king, and he pays a substantial sum of money, and he has the king sign it, and the king trusts his right-hand man that this is probably a good thing. Maybe he didn't read the fine print, that his edict is to destroy the people of God. But in Esther chapter 3, verse 13, this is what we read. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the orders, these are the orders that were sent throughout 127 provinces, to kill and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month. Annihilate little children, women, young, old, all the Jews were to die. And Mordecai heard this. Mordecai read the edict. He heard the news. He said, this is bad. Like, this is terrible. Like, we got to do something. And he's like, who can help us? How can we overcome this? And who did he think about? He thought of Esther. He says, I know a gal. And she's now in this influential place. And she's the new queen of Persia. Maybe she can help us. Maybe she can go to the king and beg for mercy. And so Mordecai goes to Esther, and he reads this to her. And he reads, hey, this is what's going to happen. And he tells her, hey, I need you to go to the king and beg for mercy. And he urged her to go into the king's presence to ask for help. But Esther doesn't want to go. Esther's scared. Esther knows that the previous queen, Queen Vashti, was banned because she disobeyed the king's orders. Esther knows that it's probably not wise to go to the king and say, hey, this edict that you just signed is probably not a good idea for the kingdom. And more than that, Esther's relationship with the king isn't going so well. According to the story, the king had not summoned Esther for over 30 days. Meaning that although they were husband and wife, they were not spending much time together. And she knew that the king had a full harem and that the king was not necessarily excited about Esther. So Esther, scared and not knowing, and even knowing that it could be a capital offense that if she approached the king, Queen Esther said, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to put myself out there. You know, I'm just a Jewish girl, orphan. You know, I don't have what it takes to stand before the king. Queen Esther says, no. I don't want to risk my life. I don't want to risk my status. And Mordecai responds to Esther's logical refusal to approach the king with these words. He sent back his answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house that you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. If you remain silent, Esther, you'll die. You and your family will die, and someone else will save God's people. Mordecai challenges Esther's understanding of time, her understanding of this moment. And then he says these words worth memorizing. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this? Who knows, Esther, Maybe you've come to this position of influence, this position of power, this royal position for such a time as this. Maybe you've come here not just to have nice clothes, nice food, and a nice place to live. Maybe you're not here just to get all the accolades of being the most beautiful woman in the country. Maybe, just maybe, Esther, you were placed in this position of power and influence to help other people. Maybe, Esther, God placed you in this position to bring justice and to oppose evil and to bring a slice of the kingdom of heaven to earth. Maybe, Esther, God has a mission for your life that's bigger than your limited understanding of your time on earth. And Mordecai says, Esther, don't let success get to your head. Don't let this success that you've had get to your head that you can misunderstand why you're on the planet. Hey, don't let what the world says about women blind you from God's anointing on your life. Mordecai challenges Esther to consider the time, to consider the moment that maybe God puts you in this position for such a time as this. And Esther responds to her stepfather. Esther listens to his challenges, and she responds in this way. She sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my maids will fast as you do. I don't know what you do when you face a difficult decision in your life. I don't know what you do when you have a difficult decision at work or in your family or a difficult health crisis or when you don't know how to move forward. But Esther called her friends together. Esther called everyone that she knew and said, would you pray for me? Would you take 3 days to fast? Would you intercede on my behalf? Because I need help. This is bigger than me. Would you come surround me with prayers? Because I'm not sure exactly what to do. I don't know what you do, but Esther called to fast and pray. And then she said these words. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Do you hear the strength of this young woman? Do you hear the courage in Esther's voice? If I perish, I perish. Even though it's against the law, even though the king doesn't want me around, I'll go. Because I know that I have a limited amount of time on earth. I know that this is a moment that I don't want to miss. And if I perish, I perish. Oftentimes in our culture and in our Christian subculture, we call our women and girls to participate in beauty pageants instead of rescue missions. We patronize women, we objectify women, we isolate women into certain roles in our culture, and we've come to believe that a woman is a beauty to rescue rather than a woman on a rescue mission. And I just need to say to young women, older women, girls, if you understand, if you sense that God's called on your life to do something meaningful, to take a position of leadership, to lead in your school, to lead in your workplace, to lead in your family, to participate in a cause bigger than yourself. Just know this. Just don't think for a minute that God's call in your life is anything less than Esther. Because you are not a beauty to rescue, you're a beautiful person on a rescue mission. That's God's call on your life. That He has called you, that He has gifted you, that He has anointed you, not just to be a beauty queen, but to be not a beauty to rescue, but a beautiful person on a rescue mission. That's who you are. And Esther heard these words from her uncle. And she prayed and she fasted. And on the third day, Esther put on the royal robes, and she stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. And the king was sitting in his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. And when he saw Queen Esther sitting in the court, he was pleased with her. And he held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand, indicating that they could communicate. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, and I'll give it to you." Now, we've got to realize that this was not a real response. He wasn't going to give up half the kingdom. But he was saying, "Esther, hey, I see you. What do you want?" And she approached the king. And then in her own way, in her own understanding of this moment, in her own knowledge of this precious time before the king, in this sense of timing, with her limited amount of influence, she responds this way to the king. "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet that I have prepared for him." And Esther invites the king to a party, because the king has never been invited to a party that he never attended, that he didn't attend. Like he knew all the way back. We know this back in chapter 1. He throws this big party. It goes on for days. He likes to have a good time. And so she's thinking, what am I needing to do to get into the mind of this king? And she says, hey, why not have a party and invite Haman, the guy that wrote the edict, and at the party, we're gonna celebrate with great food. We can have a good time. And at the party, I'm going to share my petition, my request to you. And so they went to the party. And she had a great feast. And they hosted a great time. And while they were drinking, the king asked Esther, "What is it that you want, Esther? What is it?" And Esther replied a second time in verse 8. She says this, If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request." Do you hear her words? She's got a wonderful sense of timing. She knows what to say when. She's not forcing the issue. She's not getting blunt. She's not saying it like it is. She's humble. She's deferent. If the king regards me with favor, if it pleases the king, if my petition, and then she doesn't even ask for what she actually wants. She says, hey, can I have a second party? Can I invite you into another banquet? And it's almost as if agreeing to her request to come to the banquet is agreeing to her request for help. Esther has a wonderful sense of timing. Esther has a wonderful sense of saying the right words when, but Haman doesn't. Haman goes to the party, has a great time at the party, but then he loses track of time. He misunderstands the value of his life, of his wealth, of his influence, of his power, and he's still stuck on that one guy. That one guy that hurt him. That one guy that won't bow down to him. That one guy named Mordecai. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. He had a great time at the party. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled, with rage against Mordecai. He's so upset with the one guy that won't bow down and worship him. He's so overly focused with the one guy that he's forgetting all the other things that are going on good in his life. He spends his limited amount of time and his limited amount of influence to punish Mordecai. And he gathers his family and friends, and he talks about how much Mordecai doesn't bow down to him, and how it's a disgrace, and how mad he is at Mordecai, and how he wants to punish Mordecai and all the people that Mordecai's related to, and how it's against the law that he's not bowing down to him. And he just goes on a rant before his friends and his family about his rage against Mordecai and his desire to punish him. But what I find fascinating about Haman is that as his friends were listening to him and as his wife was listening to him, no one ever said to Haman, "Hey, Haman, snap out of it." Like, no one ever says, "Hey, Haman, you're focusing on the wrong thing." No one ever says, "Hey, Haman, you're wrong. Like, you should not do this." No one ever says that to Haman. In fact, his friends and his wife and his family do just the opposite. His own wife suggested that he build the gallows 75 feet high and ask the king to hang Mordecai on it. And so he did. He built the gallows 75 feet high. He used his power, his influence, his time to go after the one guy that has hurt him, that won't bow down to him. And I wish I could share in detail the rest of this story, but you'll have to read it on your own. But it's a series of unexpected events that only God could orchestrate. In short, Esther finally communicates her request to the king. And King Artaxerxes not only retracts the edict to annihilate the Jews, but he takes Haman and punished him for his wrongdoings, even putting him in the gallows that he created for Mordecai. And then Mordecai is elevated to the second in command, taking over Haman's place as the king's right-hand man. It's an amazing story. It's a beautiful story about timing. See, the difference between Esther and Haman is that Esther has a wonderful sense of timing. Esther knew what to say when, but Mordecai didn't. Esther had a sense of humility and grace. Haman's full of pride. Haman's full of himself. Esther, when faced with a big decision, turned to fasting and prayer. Haman never prayed a prayer. But the biggest difference, please hear me, the biggest difference between Esther and Haman is this. Esther had a Mordecai, but Haman didn't. Esther had a friend, a cousin, a mentor to challenge her, to speak to her, to call her out, to remind her that she was made for such a time as this, that she's not simply a beauty to rescue, she's a beautiful person on a rescue mission, but Haman didn't. Haman had friends. Haman had advisors. Haman had a wife, and they all encouraged him to destroy his enemies. They fed into his arrogance and his pride. They even told him to build a gallows. Haman had friends and advisors, but none of them challenged him. None of them told him, Haman, you're wrong. You don't have to hate Mordecai. No one reminded him that you could live for something bigger than yourself. But Esther had a Mordecai. And if there's one truth that we can bring from this story and apply to our life today, is that we all need a Mordecai. Whatever your age and stage is your life, we all need someone with wisdom, someone with knowledge, someone that knows the time and knows us and can speak into our lives and challenge us to overcome the things that we face. We need a Mordecai to help us move away from the wrong choices and move towards the right ones, to remind us of our identity and our calling as the children of God, to participate in the mission of God, his rescue mission for the world. And we got to remember, Esther did not want to do this. She was scared. She was afraid. But it was her cousin, her mentor, that reminded her, you were made for this. This is your moment. Step into this moment to save the people. Sometimes I think we have not only a misunderstanding of time, but a misunderstanding of the source of wisdom. Like oftentimes we think when we're facing a tough decision that we're just going to get something dropped in our minds, or we're going to read a book and we're going to all of a sudden get everything figured out. And that may be true for you, but more often than not, wisdom comes from the people around us. Wisdom, the right words at the right time, comes from people that know you, love God, and can speak truth into your life. That's where the source of wisdom comes from. The people of God, the church, the people that follow God, that love you and know you and can speak words into your life. And to close our time together, to imagine us living out this truth, let me just ask you 4 simple questions. The first one is this: do you have a Mordecai in your life? Do you have a friend, a family member, a mentor, an uncle, a grandparent, someone that knows you and loves you and can speak truth into your life? Not someone that can just say, hey, keep up the good work, you're good, but someone can say, no, you're going the wrong way. You need to change your direction. Do you have a Mordecai? Do you have a person that can speak truth into your life? We were talking earlier about the fires in LA and a pastor there. As World Vision, we're also doing relief work in the area, and I was connecting with a pastor, and she says, you know what, I'm taking a leave of absence. I lost my home. I got 2 of my sisters facing cancer, and I need to go to my mentors. And so she said, I need to take some time aside. I need to speak to my mentors, and I need to have them speak into my life. Do you have those types of people? That when you're in those difficult circumstances, you can turn to them to speak into your life. My second question is this: do you listen to them? You know, whoever you have identified as your Mordecai, whoever you've identified as a mentor, as a friend that can speak into your life, do you actually listen to him? Do you pay attention enough to say, I'm going to do what you told me to do? I don't completely get it. I don't understand it. I don't want to do it. But I trust you, and I trust that what you're saying is right. You're giving me godly wisdom. There is a long list of people that I have turned to over the years that have given me wisdom at difficult times in my life. And I wouldn't be able to stand here without their counsel, without their encouragement, without their support. And I can think of many, many times where listening to their wisdom has brought me down the path that leads to what God would have me do. Do you listen to those that can speak into your life? And then this next one is, would you be willing to be a Mordecai in the lives of others? And maybe you're thinking, you know what? I don't have enough experience, or you know what? I'm not good enough. You know, I don't think I could do that. If you have the Holy Spirit inside of you, you are able to speak words of truth into the lives of others. Would you be willing to be a Mordecai into the high school students, or to the college students, or to the other students in this church or in this community? Would you be willing to take that mantle of leadership in a position of influence to speak truth into the lives of the next generation? Would you be willing? Because that's what Esther had. And that's what Esther needed. She needed a Mordecai. Would you be willing to be a Mordecai in the lives of others? And my final question is this: is there a moment that you must step into in 2025? You know, we're just wrapping up January. And maybe you've already given up on your New Year's resolutions. But let me just remind you, there's 11 months left to go. And is there something that you must do? Is there a cause? Is there a purpose? Is there a stirring in your heart? Is there an issue in your mind that you know must change? Has God placed you in your school, in your job, in your family, in your neighborhood, in the nation, in this church for such a time as this? Is there an issue? Is there something that keeps you up at night? Is there something that brings tears to your heart? For me, it's clean water. It's providing resources to vulnerable children. I thank you, all of you that have participated in that. But what is your thing? What is the cause that you want to give yourself for the sake of others? Don't miss your moment. Don't waste another day. Draw on the strength of Esther. Draw on the wisdom of Mordecai. Enter into the issue with courage and resolve. It's been said that there are minutes and there are moments. That there's minutes, chronos, there's time, And then there's moments where you know that this is your moment to step into. What is that for you? And would you be willing to step into that moment this year? Because someday, hopefully many years from now, you're going to come to the end of your life and you're going to go to heaven if you've put your faith in Jesus. And you're going to look back in your life and you're going to give an account for how you lived your life. And you're going to look back and say, I missed that moment or I didn't. But don't let that be true for you. Step into the moments because God has prepared in advance work for you to do to bring redemption to his world. God, I thank you for this moment that we can share together. A sacred moment, a holy moment, a moment where we hear from you and we respond in faith. We thank you for Esther and her positive example, and Haman, even as a negative example of how to make the most of our limited amount of time on earth. And Lord, we ask that you would truly stir in us what is it that you have called us to do. That you would also bring Mordecais into our lives, mentors, friends, to speak truth and challenge us, and that we too could be that for others. And Father, I pray for this church, Simi Covenant Church, that they collectively could be a church of strength and influence, continued blessing in the, responding to the LA fires, a blessing to Simi, that many would know you and worship you in spirit and in truth. And Father, there may even be those that are here today that don't know you, that may this be a catalyst to say, what is it, Jesus? What is it about Jesus that all these people are excited to follow? So God, I just pray your blessing over your people and ask that your Spirit would continue to move in our lives, that we could make the most of the moments that you've prepared for us. In Jesus' name, amen.